morning. Oh, come on. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here. I want to first thank Wayfair for the space. Can we hear for Wayfair? My name's John Barros, and I am the Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston. And I was trying to figure out if I walked out with one of these light fixtures, would it be too much for ethic purposes? Because I only have $50, and I think the answer is yes. But these are fabulous. It's a fabulous office space. And then a Wayfair employee kindly reminded me that I could just go online and buy it, right? So there it is. I wanted to also recognize a colleague from the mayor's office. We've got Chief of Policy Joyce Linehan in the back. Joyce, thanks for being here. The mayor is on his way back into the city, or he would have been here. This is a really exciting topic, and I am super excited to be with you this morning. We are doing a couple of things today. We are, of course, launching and talking about an important study that I'm going to get to, but we're also launching a series in the city's Economic Development Center, right? And the Economic Development Center was announced by the mayor in his 2009 State of the City this January, where the city is bringing policy discussions, workshops, trainings, trying to connect people into all of our neighborhoods. And there are 4 tracks, one for small businesses, another for equity and inclusion, a track on community economic impact, and then today's track, and this is the first launching for a convening, is on jobs, talent, and employment. The tracks have been amazing in terms of attendance, content, and so I'm going to put pressures on our presenters. People have walked out and said, "Wow!" And I'm sure today we're gonna have the same kind of important discussion, dialogue, and both from our presenter, panelists, and then as we open it up for Q&A with you. The goal of the discussion for the Economic Development Center is to raise awareness of a number of issues in our city, in our economy, and then to hear from residents, business owners, stakeholders, employers, the things that we all should be thinking about from a programmatic standpoint and from policy development. So we look forward to continue the study, to continue the dialogue around workforce development, and specifically, what about the other 50%? What about the other half? The Jobs, Talent, and Employment series has a distinct goal of making sure that as a city going through rapid economic growth, we are maximizing our homegrown talent and ensuring everyone benefits from Boston's economic growth. Specifically, in the light of Boston's low unemployment rate at about 3%, we are hearing more and more from employers that they are having difficulty finding and retaining talent. As a city, we want to facilitate these types of conversations and hear from both employers, those who are training employees, residents, on what we can do to meet both demands, to ensure that employers have talent pipeline to build their future workforce, to grow their businesses, but also to ensure Boston residents are given the opportunity to enter and advance in career pathway jobs. I want to thank Tren Nguyen, who is the director of the Office of Workforce Development, who spearheaded the report, which you have in front of you today, in partnership with Northeastern, who you're going to hear from, and Burning Glass Technology. While we are proud that Boston has the most educated workforce, where 50% of its residents have a bachelor's degree or higher, we also want to look at this other 50% as untapped potential, a potential for source of talent. And the report will confirm that those without bachelor's degrees do in fact have the skills and competencies necessary to fill many of the jobs that all of us started out with and can move up the ladder. Through our discussion this morning, I'm hopeful that you will learn some of the recommendations from research findings and work together as a city, employers, workforce development providers, and residents to deliver solutions to ensure that every Boston resident can thrive and take a part in this economic growth. So I'd like to now move us through the next part of the agenda. And we're going to hear from the Associate Director of the Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy at Northeastern, Dr. Sasser Modestino, thank you very much, Alicia, who is going to come up here and talk about the studies and the data that we are presenting to you in that study. Let's hear it for Dr. Modestino.
Great, thank you. And thank you to Office of Workforce Development and Burning Glass for engaging in this line of research. These are issues that I think about a lot and have thought about a lot over the last several decades. Why is this report important? I had 2 reporters ask me this question last night, and I think it really starts with the issue. We know that prosperity has not been shared equally across the Commonwealth. That's been a focus of the Walsh administration for some time now, and yet the state's economic growth relies on both baccalaureate and non-baccalaureate workers. And so we decided to bring some new data to this question that we've been wrestling with for some time. We bring proprietary individual level data from worker resumes as well as job postings to actually assess the skills of non-baccalaureate workers and how well they match up to what employers are looking for. And specifically, we're trying to highlight where these skills overlap and where there are gaps so we can guide workforce development policy and the kinds of hiring strategies that employers are looking to use. And the recommendations that we have here are essentially to build policies that can foster skill development for non-BA workers. And what's really critical is making sure that workers are getting the skills that employers are needing, that are in demand right now, and also that they're getting the supports to be able to earn the credentials that are going to demonstrate that competency. And each case, the good news is we have examples in Boston for each of our recommendations of things that are already going on, and we just need to do more of it and engage in a deeper way. So what motivated my interest in this question is something that I have studied for a while. And one of the things that I uncovered in my research is that during the Great Recession, we saw that employers increased skill requirements. So here I'm looking at the share of job postings that require a bachelor's degree or higher, and how that changed over time. So you'll notice as the unemployment rate increased, the share of postings that required a bachelor's degree increased by 10 percentage points. That's a huge shift in only 3 years. And we saw a similar thing happening in terms of the share that were requiring years of experience. Now, what's really surprising is that then during the recovery, these requirements fell. What does that say to us? Probably most people in this room have already guessed the answer to that, but it took an entire line of academic research to show that employers respond to the number and types of workers that are in the labor market, right? When labor markets are very loose, when there's high unemployment, they will seek the most educated and the most experienced. Who wouldn't, right? When labor markets are tight, like right now, we know that employers will also adapt. And so that kind of flies in the face of this college for all mentality that we've been hearing for the last several decades. So what did we do in the study? We started off like many people do, just looking at the characteristics of BA versus non-BA workers. We also delved a little more into the details of the kinds of degrees that they study and the fields that they study. But we didn't stop there. We went and sampled resumes from Greater Boston for BA versus non-BA workers, and we looked at the actual skills that people list on their resumes to get a better idea of how these vary by people with different education credentials. And specifically, we're looking for where these skills overlap across BA versus non-BA workers and where there are gaps. But we didn't stop there. Then we used a set of proprietary data from Burning Glass Technologies to look at the job postings that employers put out there to see what are the skills that are required for jobs that are seeking bachelor's degree recipients versus non-BA workers. And then we also compare the skill requirements within specific occupations, for example, administrative assistants, to see where these skill levels differ and where we've seen up-credentialing. So where do non-BA workers fit into Boston's labor force? So first of all, not too surprising, as a share of population, non-BA workers have about 23% of them have only a high school degree, 15% have some college, and 5.4% have an associate's degree. Now keep those figures in mind because we're going to come back to that college completion rate and talk about some reasons why we have a greater share with only some college rather than having that associate's degree credential. Boston's labor force has been robust over the last few years compared to the United States. You can see the figure on the left is showing our labor force growth compared to the rest of the US. We've done quite well over the last several years. What's the secret to our success? Look to the figure on the right. A lot of this is driven by immigrants, right? So immigrants drive most of our population and labor force growth. And because of this, it's going to be important for us to ensure that immigrants can be successful in the labor market. Access to post-secondary training and education has remained quite unequal in the greater Boston area, with many low-income residents facing different barriers. So as I was just talking about, non-BA workers are quite a diverse group. They are much more likely to be overrepresented by Black and Hispanic workers, by immigrants. About 20% of non-BA workers are naturalized citizens. Another 20% are not US citizens. And because of that, ESL programs and services are going to be a big part of the solution. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Non-BA workers also have less favorable labor market outcomes compared to those with a bachelor's degree. So they're 2 to 3 times less likely to be in the labor force. They're much more likely to work part-time. They have annual incomes that are 30 to 70% less than those with a BA degree. And about a quarter of high school degree recipients and a third of associate's degree recipients are living below the poverty level. Now, I would say that for non-BA workers with the right skills, STEM occupations offer a great way to be earning a living wage and to have great career opportunities. And I've kind of outlined here in this box where I think those opportunities exist in terms of IT, engineering, healthcare, lots of the STEM occupations that you hear about. And yet at the same time, despite increases in certificates and associate's degree earned, by and large, non-BA workers are not really majoring in the fields of study that are going to lead to these STEM occupations. So you can see in terms of healthcare, we've done a pretty good job here. About 20% of certificates are in health professions and related programs. We've definitely got the message out there in terms of healthcare. But if you look at the share of certificates as well as associate's degrees that are earned in engineering and IT, those are much lower, right? And understanding the barriers to people earning these types of degrees are going to be important if we think we're going to match up the skills for individuals without a bachelor's degree to jobs. All right, how do the skills of non-BA workers compare to those of BA workers? Before we jump into the data, a few caveats are in order. First of all, this is data that comes from resumes that were scraped off of the internet. And so imagine we're going to be looking at the skills of people who, first of all, are looking for jobs, second of all, looking for jobs on the internet, and third, are on this platform. The other thing is that they're going to be, we're going to be taking the skills right off of the resume, right? So this is text analysis. So individuals might actually have other skills that they didn't list on their resume. But if you're looking for a job, you have every incentive to be listing skills on your resume, right? And then third of all, we need some way to kind of categorize the types of skills that people have. And so we're actually going to use the categorization that Burning Glass Technologies came up with. And we're going to be looking at things like baseline skills. So think of things like project management and leadership, communication. We'll be looking at specialized skills. Think of things like information security or accounting or budgeting, and then also software skills. And there's lots of different software skills, everything from SQL to Oracle to even advanced Microsoft Excel and things like that. So the first thing to notice is that, probably not too surprisingly, individuals who have greater levels of education are more likely to list these skills on their resume. So this is showing you the share of individuals who list any baseline skill, for example, on their resume. And as we progress with greater levels of education, they're more likely to list those skills. But you'll also notice there's not that much difference between people with an associate's degree and those with a bachelor's degree. Where we find the biggest gap is in the category of software skills. And you're going to see this theme repeated throughout my presentation here, is that that's where we've identified a lot of the gaps. If we look within baseline skills, so we weren't satisfied just sort of looking at these broad categories, what are the actual places where we see overlap? So there's lots of skill overlap in things like management, creativity, multitasking, leadership, all of those kinds of things that employers are looking for that you might wrap into something called grit, right? Where we're seeing a lot of these gaps are in things at the bottom there, things like presentation skills, Excel. Probably the biggest gap here is in Microsoft Office. So we have 27% 27% of bachelor degree recipients listing Microsoft Office as a skill, compared to only 9% of associate degree holders and 8% of high school graduates. In terms of specialized skills, so things like, again, information security or accounting, we see a lot of skill overlap in things like inventory management, product inspection. Big gaps, though, in terms of, again, information security, general marketing, those types of skills that you might need either a course in or even an entire program of study. And then, in terms of software skills, there's only 4 areas of overlap in terms of software skills, things like networking, hardware, cybersecurity, clinical informatics, and version control. Otherwise, we see really large gaps, right, in terms of software skills. Okay, so how do the skill requirements for BA jobs match up to those for jobs that are seeking to hire a BA? So again, here we're looking at job posting data from employers. So we're only going to be looking at employers who are, 1, hiring at the period we're looking at, 2, they're hiring online, and the skills that they're actually listing. What's really surprising is that we see very similar patterns in the data, which is very reassuring that the postings and the resumes are lining up. And again, most of the deficiencies are in the software skill category. But even within the software skill category, there's very little difference between jobs looking for an associate degree holder versus a bachelor's degree holder, even in terms of the software skills. We see many of the same trends in terms of baseline skills. There's actually more overlap in the job requirements in terms of the baseline skills they're asking for between non-BA versus BA workers, which is somewhat reassuring. But again, these gaps in terms of presentation skills, planning, research, right, things that are very hard maybe to teach in a classroom. Non-BA job postings do vary in terms of the kinds of specialized skills they require, but what's really interesting is some of these things actually, they show greater proficiency in, so things like scheduling, emergency and intensive care, basic patient care, retail industry knowledge. Where we see gaps are in things like regulation and law compliance, financial reporting, things like that, that again, you might need a community college course in, or even a community college degree. Among the top software skills, again, there's very little overlap between what's required for BA versus non-BA positions. We see big gaps in these things like SQL and Java, a lot of the things that you probably hear about floating around with your IT department. So those are places where there's opportunities to fill those gaps. So what happened during the Great Recession? So here's where we get back to that first picture I was talking about, right, where employers increased their requirements for people with a bachelor's degree during the recession because they could, because there are a lot of people out there who are unemployed with a bachelor's degree. And so what we did is we looked at occupations that are traditionally middle skill occupations that usually only required high school or maybe an associate's degree. What happened to them during the recession? So here on the left-hand side on these blue bars, that's the share of workers before the recession hit who had a bachelor's degree in these occupations. Okay, so that's what was actually needed at the time before the recession hit. And then these pink bars here are showing you the share of job postings that required a bachelor's degree in 2017. And so you'll notice across all of those occupations that I'm showing you here, things that are computer related, drafting and engineering, law, life science, administrative assistant, we see that basically the bar moved for employees, right, for hiring people. Now, a lot of these jobs require a bachelor's degree that didn't before. Now, employers might be doing this to proxy for certain kinds of skills, right, that they can't observe in workers that don't have a bachelor's degree. So we hear this all the time from employers. So if that's the case, then it might be possible for us to provide a credential or some kind of training, right, that would indicate if a non-BA worker has that particular skill. So we decided to look within a particular occupation. We did this for a number of different occupations. Here I'm just going to show you administrative assistants to look at what are the actual skills that are required within a specific occupation compensation for BA versus non-BA workers. And you can see here, I've lined up the blue bars here are the non-BA job postings, the purple bars are the BA job postings, and you can see every single skill that's on a BA job posting is on a non-BA job posting. They're just at different frequencies, and they actually line up in terms of which ones are more likely to be asked for versus not. And so where we see some of the gaps is just in terms of, say, scheduling. We see 100% of BA jobs asked for scheduling, 44% or so of non-BA jobs asked for scheduling. But that suggests to me that there's a lot of overlap in terms of what employers are looking for in this particular occupation, where some employers are looking for a BA and some are not. And so there's the possibility for us to provide a credential there that could signal that non-BA workers have a lot of these kinds of skills. So how do we build a more inclusive workforce development strategy? Our first recommendation is to collaborate with employers to determine what skills are in high demand and to help non-BA workers acquire the right credentials. I think we've heard this a lot, right? I think 10 years ago I was on a panel that suggested this as well. What's different here is that I just showed you in a very detailed way that skills change rapidly, right? And the kinds of skills that we need change rapidly, and employers want very particular skills. They don't want you to walk in and say you know how to program. They want you to program in SQL, period, end of story, right? So we need to stay on top of these changes. The only way to do that is to build partnerships with employers. Some of the ways we can do that are apprenticeship programs, right? That's where people are actually learning on the job. And so obviously they're getting to learn the skills that employers want. A good experience or example of this is the city's EMT program, right, which is providing that credential. Incumbent worker programs. So these are programs where firms help their own employees gain skills to maintain employment or to advance their careers within their own firm. So some examples we have of this are Partners Healthcare has partnered with Southern New Hampshire University to provide a variety of certificates for their employees. We'll also hear from others in the healthcare industry today. And then finally, expanding IT training to become more responsive and inclusive. Responsive in the sense of what is the actual software that we need to be learning today, right? If you're in medical record keeping, the only system you need to know is Epic right now. And if you don't know Epic, forget it, right? All the healthcare people are laughing, right? If you walk into your doctor's office, everyone is struggling right now to learn Epic. And so we need things like Grow with Google, which you'll hear more about today, where we can gain these skills more rapidly and we can keep on top of what's going on. Recommendation 2, boosting completion rates at community colleges, particularly in high demand fields where employers are willing to partner and provide employment. And so here's another issue that we've talked about many times. So encouraging partnerships between community colleges and employers. We have good examples of this right here in the city of Boston, for example, Bunker Hill and their program with Eversource, the electric power utility program. And this is great because employers get to shape the curriculum. They get to have input into what the skills are that people are learning, and then there's a guaranteed job at the end of it. So we do that, but we need to do more of that. Providing wraparound services for students at community colleges. The population that's moving through the community colleges is one that needs all sorts of supports in terms of being able to fill out financial aid forms, being able to navigate a college campus for the first time, if they're a first generation college student. So things like Success Boston that help students do that are great, and we need more of that. Increasing dual enrollment between high school and community colleges, that's let students earn college credits for free, essentially, and also understand what's expected of them in college so they can persist. 3, improving Boston's vocational career pathways. So vocational education, again, is something that's hands-on, provides skills, provides a career pathway, still has the academic rigor of the regular high school curriculum. So about 50% of our vocational ed students go on to a 4-year college. So it's not cutting off a career path at all or a college path at all. In Massachusetts, they call us the Cadillac of Voc Tech in other parts of the country because we've had this strong, robust system for over 100 years. Cities and towns are required to provide this education, and yet we have giant waiting lists at schools for students to get into these programs. And so that's been a real bottleneck for people who want to have access to this kind of career training. And then finally, our last recommendation, expanding ESL services for immigrants, and particularly in the context of workforce development. So this is actually a requirement under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, but it also just makes sense, right? So compared to the US, Boston has relied more heavily on immigrants, and so it's in our best interest to make sure that immigrants can succeed in our economy. Most of the occupations that are better paying and lead to career paths require some kind of English proficiency. And yet, if you look across ESL programs, only 10% of them are workforce-based. And we have some prime examples of this going on in Boston. Jewish Vocational Services does this to the gold standard, right? Where they are providing ESL in the context of their bank teller program, their farm tech program. So people are getting jobs, they're matching people up with employer demands directly. And then even right now, we're gonna hear more today about the services that Encore is providing in their career centers that also focuses on ESL training as well. So we're gonna hear from our panel right now, but I want you to think about kind of the recommendations that we've made, and we'll talk a little bit about the actionable steps that we can take to try to further this discussion and kind of move this policy agenda along, so we can think about how do we make Boston's workforce much more inclusive so that everybody can share in the prosperity of the Boston economy. Thank you.
So first, this is an amazing study, but it was also amazing is when you asked the lead economist to do it in 10 minutes. Let's hear it one more time for Dr. Modestino. So at this point, I'd like to ask our panelists to join me up front here, and it doesn't matter the order. And we're going to have a panel discussion on reactions to the study, but really about their experience in the economy, either as employers, as those who are supporting the economy and the labor force and labor force development, et cetera. And then once we have a dialogue with our panelists, we're going to open it up for Q&A. At that point, I'll ask Dr. Modestino to join us up front, and so we can all engage in some dialogue with you. So as you hear what's going on, keep track of your questions for later. I wanted to open this up with the panelists introducing themselves. And so if we can just roll down here, starting with Sean.
Okay, thank you. I'm Sean Gallagher. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for the Future of Higher Education and Talent Strategy at Northeastern University.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Poole. I'm the head of talent acquisition for Wayfair. So it's nice to see you all, and welcome to my home turf.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Van Cleef Conley, and I'm the product lead for the Google IT Support Professional Certificate.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Peterson, the Director of Employment for Encore Boston Harbor.
Good morning. I'm Joanne Pokaski. I'm the Senior Director of Workforce Development and Community Relations at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center.
Good morning. I'm Trin Wind. I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I'm going to go right into our questions. And the first one actually is a lightning round. It's a really general question. If you can just take 2 minutes to share your immediate reaction and thoughts on the report's findings. Trin, you want to lead us off?
Sure. So first I have to say that we have been working on this up-credentialing phenomena for quite some time. And it's been 2 years since we've planned and looked at trends and figure out where to put our resources and in our time. And one of the reasons why we did this work was because we wanted to make sure that employers, institutions, our neighborhoods saw themselves in an economy that is inclusive. So while we are so privileged to have half of our population having a bachelor's degree, we have to also understand that those who don't have the opportunity, they need pathways, and it needs to be it needs to be accessible at the same time. And so the whole notion of having it to be inclusive is a primary policy that the Walsh administration had to really abide by. The second clarification that I wanted to state was that please don't go back and tell your kids don't go to college and not get a BA, because this is not the purpose of it. This is, we all know that industry research shows that educational attainment strongly correlates with economic mobility and choices, which allows you to provide for your family. And so while we're promoting those who don't have a BA, what we do also priority at the Walsh administration is that, post-secondary education is very key. K-12 is really important. Quality education, access to all the important social sectors are really important. That's key priority. But we also cannot abandon those who did not have the great opportunity to go down that path. And so this is more of an inclusive strategy. And while the report outlines all of these challenges and these gaps, this is only the first step in which we are prioritizing this work.
I'll go next. So for me, this affirmed a lot of the work we've done to work with hiring managers and say, what skills are really needed for this job, and how do we figure out if people have them? And let's forget if they have an associate degree or a bachelor's degree, but what are the skills people need, and how do we figure out if they have them? And we're finding people who are better fits for the job, who stay longer at the end of the day, and I think that's really important. And then once we have people in working with us, then we do a lot of work to help them gain additional skills and think about their next role as well. And one other thing I want to say is in Massachusetts, we have these categories: high school, some college, associate's degree. But between high school and associate's degree, there are some really marketable credentials that I'd love to see if we could start tracking. Because if you have some college, you might have gone to one class and then stopped, or you might have a really marketable credential. And I'd like us to maybe tease that out as a state.
With Encore, we are working to hire close to 6,000 people by early June. So we're really in the middle of hiring people. And one thing that's interesting about the hospitality industry is that a lot of our jobs do not require a bachelor's degree. So we're not up against that barrier. But we are looking for skills, and we're looking for people who have experience that we can make use of in our thousands of jobs. One thing that jumped out at me is we cannot hire this volume of people without great partnerships, without working with the local career centers, working with training organizations that can help us find the people who have those skills. And in Alicia's presentation, it did show that we have, I think it was maybe a little bit off, but it's that you showed that we have ESL training as part of our career center. We're not offering that just yet. That's something we will offer once we're up and running to all of our employees. However, we partnered with a number of local organizations and the Gaming Commission to ensure that people have access to ESL training so that they can obtain our jobs. So, it's amazing to look just at the low unemployment rate, trying to hire all these people. And really the key for us has been looking for people who have some transferable skills, who've got that basic hospitality experience that we can then train on the job and bring them up in the industry. And also forming those partnerships, because we can't do it alone. We need to work with people in the city, training organizations, and community-based organizations. Yeah.
I was really struck by how the report put a strong responsibility on employers to flag the most in-demand skills and make sure that those without a four-year degree do have a strong and viable path toward credentials. And I think we're starting to see the shift from individual employers competing for talent to jointly working with other partners, even competitors, to think about jointly developing the pipeline that's really necessary for the workforce. And I think to be effective here, that needs to be paired with, the most in-demand market skills and not necessarily, commercial ends for the employers. And also to start thinking about, non-academic providers in this credentialing space and what that can look like when you bring together a wide set of players.
Thanks. I think this report hit very close to home for those of us at Wayfair. We're a company that is headquartered in Boston and has grown very rapidly in very recent years, and has suddenly faced all kinds of hiring challenges as we double and then triple and quadruple down in the city of Boston, to the point where we've now expanded the way we think about what used to be our campus recruiting team is now our campus and early careers program, and we've become acutely aware of the fact that there is a huge amount of talent in this market that we are not talking to, and that historically we haven't even known how to find or engage with. And Wayfair is a tech company. A large number of our jobs in this building are software development jobs, and they were very high paying. And we're seeing it as really a two-way street, where our employees are looking for to be a part of a more diverse workforce. They are telling us this. They want to be a part of this. We also want to be able to make that happen. And we're acutely aware that we have to take a major step forward in what services we're willing to provide, and training, and also deepen our partnerships with the organizations that can help connect us with these students. And that, for us, is actually quite fresh. This is something where we're probably only 1 or 2 years into this process, and we have a long way to go.
Great. I was struck by the fluidity of education and experience. Alicia's first chart showed both experience requirements and educational credential requirements. And when employers are making a hiring decision, it's fundamentally about, can someone do the job? Can they perform well in the job? It's about competency. And so you can look to a degree, or, as others have pointed out, another type of educational credential. We're living in a world now where, including from companies like Google and others, there's a variety of new credentials available. Employers are starting to change their practices. We did an employer survey recently, and we found that a quarter of employers nationally are moving toward what's called skills-based hiring or competency-based hiring. So other employers are looking at pre-hire assessments. So via technology, there's a change in practice that's beginning to happen, and a lot of potential when we think about not only the educational credential, whether it's a certificate or a high school diploma, all the way up to maybe a master's degree, but how that overlaps with work experience and how you can gain skills on the job or through an apprenticeship, which was in the presentation, and other work-based learning experiences. And that can stand in for what we've classically relied on colleges to produce.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So during the presentation, we heard Dr. Modestino talk about the fact that a lot of the recommendations or solutions are happening already, but we need to scale. One of those initiatives that she highlighted was Grow with Google. Natalie, you represent Grow with Google, and an initiative which is helping people across the U.S. develop their skills and careers. You also partnered with Northeastern last September, which has enabled individuals to complete Google's IT support professional certificate and receive credit toward a bachelor's degree in information technology. That's a pretty innovative example of industry and academia working together to support the report's recommendation of aligning key skills with employer demand. Tell us a little about the partnership. How did it come together, and how other companies might adopt similar certifications?
Great. So I'll start a little bit with the origin story of why we built this thing and why it mattered at Google. So I used to run Google's internal IT support function, and we had a real challenge finding qualified candidates. And we knew that qualified, it didn't have to mean having a four-year college degree. And in fact, when you look at the 150,000 open roles in IT support, the majority of them don't require a four-year college degree. And so we partnered with a nonprofit organization headquartered here in Boston called Year Up, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And they work with opportunity youth to train them in IT support and other areas, and then place them in corporate apprenticeships. And so we wound up building out an almost 3-year-long training and hiring pipeline from that apprenticeship program to 2 summer IT internships at Google, and then into the full-time IT support program that I was running. And the foundation of that effort was to build a scholarship program for all of our year-uppers to get a free associate degree in IT. And I remember finding the money for this thing at Google from like leftover purchase orders, because it really wasn't costly, right? But when you consider folks for whom Pell Grant funding isn't even enough to bridge that gap, it was pretty meaningful. And so the stats were certainly against us, but we had really strong success with the program. And so we thought, well, how can we make these opportunities available to more people online everywhere? And so that set the stage for the Google IT Support Professional Certificate Program, which is designed for complete novice learners to train for 8 months on Coursera with Google-developed curriculum to become job-ready in IT support. And one of the key differentiators are these hands-on labs that we have, so it can bridge that sort of classic dilemma of you can't get the job without the experience and you can't get the experience without the job, so our learners can troubleshoot. And so through this effort, we had a really explicit focus on overlooked populations, and Google.org had funded 10,000 scholarships for veterans and refugees and low-income learners at key nonprofits to take this for free. And we scaled the program to 25 community colleges this past fall across the US. And so the Northeastern online bachelor program in IT was really compelling to us because it was looking at this working adult population, and it had a very strong focus on veterans, which is a learner group that, of course, we care a lot about. And so for the first time ever on Coursera, you could take content not developed by universities and get credit for prior learning at a university through the Northeastern effort. So if you're a learner and you take the Google certificate, you can apply 12 credits toward the Northeastern program and get some tuition remission in the process. And so that's been a really interesting partnership for us to consider and look at. You also asked how employers can get involved, and one of the sort of scratch our head moments in building the product was, how do we take learners who might come from, these non-traditional backgrounds and therefore have lower social capital and really connect them to employers? How do we sort of cement that handshake? And so we brought together peer companies, some might consider them competitors of ours, to consider those who complete the IT Support Professional Certificate for their open IT support roles. And so now we have over 30 national and multinational companies, including Hulu and Bank of America and Walmart and Sprint and Intel and Google, of course, who are considering those who complete the program for their roles. And so that is the sort of shift I referenced before of thinking about how we can collaborate with other companies to really jointly develop the workforce. And so it's been a really interesting venture. I will say, too, that a huge learning on Google's part was that it's really important to team up with your recruiting and HR functions to think about how can we lessen the job requirements. So the IT internship I mentioned used to require a 4-year degree, but the full-time IT program I was running required no degree. So we worked with that team and ensured that only those with an associate's degree and students of all levels, freshman through senior, could apply for this internship program. And guess what happened? We were able to fill the roles. We had a much more non-traditional group of learners coming into the program. And as you saw from the presentation, there was very little difference in competencies, but what we did find was a huge uptick in terms of grit, self-determination, motivation that are really key differentiators in an ever-changing field like tech. So that's a little bit about our story and the way we've been able to come together with other like-minded employers.
I don't know about you guys, but I think we need to give Grow with Google a little hand. I think those are the kind of initiatives and partnerships that we need to see more of. Northeastern, on the academic side, has really helped to make that work. So Sean, you saw the Google partnership come alive from within Northeastern University. While this particular program addresses the IT support field, there's likely potential to parlay certificates across a number of degrees. What other skill sets or careers are Northeastern looking to amplify?
Thanks. It's a great question. I think we saw some wonderful examples of where the gap areas are in the local market, and it carries forward nationally. And of course, through our online programs, we have a national reach. We're doing it in advanced manufacturing in a partnership with General Electric here in Boston and worldwide. So that's kind of a key area where you can see there's jobs in an industry and a need for talent, especially in terms of leadership and digital skills and getting people to move up from the shop floor, perhaps perhaps into a leadership position, go from an associate degree to a bachelor's degree. Healthcare, as we saw in the presentation, is another area, whether it's sort of the biotech angle on healthcare or nursing and other areas. One of the skills that really cuts across many jobs, and I think it's important to note, yes, we think of these tech jobs and analytical jobs and coding jobs as being at tech firms like a Google, but as I'm sure many of you know, in hospitals, in banks, in nonprofits, in our educational institutions, really across industry sectors, there are these skills and educational needs that aren't necessarily about what industry sector you're in, but rather cutting across all kinds of occupational roles. And so analytics is a key one, project management is another, and so we have degree programs and certificates and partnerships with employers around all those in a way that's really sort of industry neutral.
Thank you. So it's really important. We've got amazing academic institutions in our city, and being able to partner with them to make our city run better, to make this place a better place for all of our residents is really important. So that Northeastern Google partnership is critical. I'm often talking about the number of jobs we grow in Boston, or the fact that in the last 5 years, we've been able to add another 120,000 jobs to our local economy. It's about 25,000 a year. Most people, when I say that, they think about new companies coming, but that's not always true. In fact, many of the companies here, and Wayfarers is an example of that, are growing here within our city, are growing jobs. It's not just about the new companies coming, it's about helping companies grow with talent. Deborah, Wayfair grew its headcount by more than almost any other Massachusetts-based company last year, hiring over 4,000 employees. There are plans for over at least 3,000 new jobs ahead. As such, I know the team has looked to creative solutions for finding talent. Tell us a little about this process and provide us with specific examples of what Wayfair has done around finding talent in non-BA population.
Sure, and to clarify, that 4,000 number that's just the Greater Boston number. We have offices and locations in other parts of the world too, but the majority of our hiring, or our headquarters, is here.
And we like to keep hiring here and hiring here.
Well, that is the plan.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. I think for us it has been about starting to acknowledge the need to change our requirements, because they aren't necessarily always proxies for skill, or they are used as a proxy for skill despite the fact that another population has the same skills. And so for us, a bachelor's degree is no longer a requirement for a software development role at Wayfair. But that's pretty new for us, like within the last year. When I first joined the company, we required college degrees for all of our sales and service representatives as well. Why? I mean, no good reason. And there was actually no data that even supported a strong correlation. So I think we've moved a long way in our acknowledgement that we need to be evaluating skills rather than simply quickly browsed or scanned words on a resume. One of the ways we're doing that is, and I know a number of organizations are partnering with SkillList, which is an alternative resume platform. So that allows, rather than submitting a resume that simply lists where you've been, candidates actually have an opportunity to create skills-based profiles of what they actually know how to do, which is generally far more relevant to to understanding how you might perform in the future. And I know we've been doing that in a partnership with the Boston Chamber of Commerce and with other companies. I mentioned these partnerships that have become so important to us as we think about how to expand our reach and our ability to find talent across Greater Boston. We have many different boot camp partnerships at this point, and we plan on continuing to expand them. Our goal is to have more than 50% of our entry-level software developers come out of boot camps, whereas historically 100% of them have come from four-year colleges. And every time we grow this number, we discover that actually we can grow this number further. I think there's some question for us about how much these individual organizations can scale, which is actually why we've partnered with so many of them. The most recent partnership that we've launched is with Resilient Coders, and it's quite early in that relationship. We're only a few months in, but one of the reasons that we feel pretty optimistic is that there is an extremely tight feedback loop between Wayfair and these boot camp programs about the kinds of skills people are coming to us with. So in the Resilient Coders example, which is 100% minority focused and over-indexes on a female population, which is terrific for us as we try to diversify our engineering roles. That population goes through 14 weeks of training and then has to pass the same hiring bar to get into Wayfair as any other software developer would. So we're not changing the bar. The assessment is skills-based. We are not changing the entry-level compensation or anything else about the program. When those new hires arrive, they also go into 12 more weeks of training at Wayfair, which is a program that we offer to all of our entry-level software employees. So we're talking about, that's 26 weeks of training before someone, half in the boot camp, half at Wayfair, before somebody's moving into their sort of full-time permanent role. And that's really necessary. Ours likely may need to expand over time, and certainly some of the bootcamp partnerships may need to as well. So it's a large commitment on the part of two organizations in order to get these folks into the pipeline. And the reality is the ramp time is going to be longer than someone who's been steeped in the material for 4 years, right? So you have an incredibly focused population with an incredible amount of determination, and some of these folks are career pivoters. Some of them are folks who had no access to tech previously. But we are making sure that as that becomes a larger and larger percentage of all of our hires, that actually becomes the new normal around here. And we have similar partnerships and programs in some of the non-technical roles as well. I think it is in the technical space where we are watching the most closely because the skills, frankly, they're so challenging, right? These are hard skills to get, and they also take a long time to learn. And when we talk about being skills-based in our assessments, it's not just about who learned a bit of JavaScript and a bit of Python quickly, because you might get to Wayfair and get moved on to a team that actually works in another language. So we actually, and we don't actually care if you've learned that language before, but our assumption is that you can learn it quickly. So it is partially about skills and partially about demonstrated ability to learn quickly, because to your point, Professor, the skills are changing so fast around here. So these programs cannot become ossified any more so than we can in terms of what is needed now might actually be quite different than what's needed even 6 months from now. So the ability to learn technical skills is actually critical for us.
Thank you, thank you. Jenny, like Wayfair, there's a tall order at hand for Encore. Nearly 6,000 jobs to fill in a very short window. Your workforce development plan discusses the importance of hiring a workforce that's qualified, local, and diverse. The plan also presents a path for individuals that may not have a high school or secondary degree. You've talked about supporting ESOL programs throughout the region, and then shortly bringing it in-house at some point. Knowing that employers are using BAs as an easy way to sort resumes, what specific strategies has Encore used to manage the applicant pool and make this goal a reality?
Absolutely. So, I talked earlier about partnerships and all of the work that's happened, not only within Encore, but with other organizations in Everett, in Malden, Medford, Boston, of course. We started the work really, over a year ago, and we put together the workforce plan. And one of the key needs that came up from the community and from all of our partners was, these are brand new jobs in some cases. You've never had a casino in this area before. What are these jobs going to be, and how can we learn about them in advance? And similar to what Joanne was mentioning about, matching skills with the jobs, that was something that was really important. We wanted to be completely transparent about, here are all the jobs that are coming. We're not going to be hiring for them for another, 10 months, but we wanted everybody to know exactly what the jobs were and exactly what the skills were that were going to be required. So we actually hired a company called SkillSmart to create this job skills platform. So we literally mapped out every single job. We took the job descriptions and we assigned specific skills and job requirements to each of them that people could kind of go through the checklist and show, that they could look at the job not only at like a long description, but skill by skill and match up their previous experience with those skills and kind of validate, yes, I've got the skills for this job. And if there was a skill that they were missing, we were directing people to local training organizations and online resources where they could get that skill. So if somebody's going in, they want to be they want to fill one of our culinary roles, but they were maybe missing some of the culinary skill sets, we were directing them to culinary classes at Bunker Hill and at NECAT, one of our other training organizations, and some of the other culinary training resources. So well in advance of hiring, we launched the platform last June, and hiring really started this January, February. People had a chance to review over 500 different job titles, look at the skills, see where they matched up, both in professional experience, but also in personal life and volunteer experience. If someone has been volunteering at a church, they might have some of those customer service and greeting and hospitality skills that they would need for being a job, say, as a lobby greeter at Encore. So that was kind of step one, being really transparent about what the skills were. And we went through a similar exercise that's been mentioned where we met with every single hiring manager to say, okay, what do you really need here? Do you absolutely have to have a high school degree? Do you have to have a college degree? And in a lot of cases, we found that no, you don't. The skills and the experience is much more important than the actual degree. There were a couple of areas that we identified where we knew there was going to be a skills gap in this area. One of those was for our table games dealers. There are not casinos or there haven't been casinos in Massachusetts. Now there is one in Western Massachusetts in Springfield. But we knew there weren't going to be people who could fill, close to 1,000 jobs in the casino dealing table games. So we partnered up with Cambridge College and we opened a dealer school at their Charlestown location. And what we did with that is we actually hired some of our casino managers and casino supervisors early and put together a curriculum. Cambridge College provides us the space and a lot of the kind of back-end administrative support. And we brought in the tables, all the equipment, we hired the teachers, and we got people into this dealer school. And really all we were looking for there was some solid math skills and customer service. And those were things that we could kind of pull out of the SkillSmart platform. In some cases, there were people who had indicated math skills for other jobs that they might have been looking at, people who had indicated customer service skills, and we were able to reach out to them and say, hey, you might be a fit for dealer school. Come on down, take the math test, do a quick in-person assessment with us on, we wanted to be sure that people had kind of the social interaction skills that they need to be a dealer. And we've trained through that several hundred folks who all now have job offers to start a career as a casino dealer. So those are just kind of two of the highlights on the front end. Again, the English training and the hospitality training has also been big, working with organizations like the International Institute of New England, Best Corp, Bunker Hill, again, they have hospitality training. A lot of the local schools and other community organizations that are doing training and helping them get a pipeline in with us. After we are up and running and open, there's going to be kind of this path forward. So people, once they're hired, how do we scale them up and get them on a path into management, into future executive roles? And that is by we will be providing free of charge English as a second language classes. We're providing GED training. There's a tuition reimbursement program, so people who do want to go back to school and continue working on those degrees can get the education and training that they need to move up. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Really appreciate that. Let's move now to Joanne. Joanne, Beth Israel is one of the multiple large healthcare institutions in the city of Boston. I mean, if we talk about Wayfair and Encore as, sort of rapidly hiring and what's happening now, when we think about healthcare institutions in the city, they've been kind of the steady grow and one of the pillars of our economy. Right now in the city of Boston, at a time when we have historically low unemployment, can you speak to the specific programs that Beth Israel has implemented around incumbent worker training to provide them with career ladder opportunities, specifically those without BA degrees?
Sure, happy to do that. So we've got about 11,000 employees at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and March 1st we became part of a system that has 35,000 employees. We're now the second largest employer in the state. But I'm at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and we've done a lot of work in the last sort of 15 years to really build out a program for folks. So we hire from like the widest range of employees you can find, from people who are washing our dishes in the cafeteria to people who have multiple PhDs and are trying to cure cancer. And every single person is important to healthcare and keeping our patients safe and happy. And we live that every day. There is a specific set of jobs below a bachelor's degree that are very important to healthcare and sometimes require very specific training. And a problem we found was that sometimes just the labor market is not producing enough of those folks. And so those are jobs like pharmacy technicians, central processing technicians who sterilize the equipment, med lab technicians who kind of, assess your blood work and figure out what's going on, patient care techs, medical assistants. If you don't have enough of any of those people, the hospital can grind to a halt. So we're really watching those jobs, and we figured out a way to train people into those jobs. So again, we figured out what are the basic skills people need to be successful in this job, and then what can we train them to get them credentialed or ready to do those jobs. So we call those our pipeline programs, and we've developed about 12 different pipeline programs for specific occupations through the hospital, and any year we're running about 5 or 6 of them. So one example is central processing technicians, and those are people who sterilize our equipment in the OR, very important. But there's a huge demand. Healthcare is 20% of the jobs in the city of Boston. So when somebody graduates from a central processing technician program, there's a lot of people who want to hire them. We switched to a strategy where every year we're sponsoring our employees through that program at Bunker Hill Community College, paying the full freight. So they're graduating through that program and then moving into a job that starts paying at $21 an hour and has a 4-rung career ladder and other possibilities. So that's the kind of work we're doing to make sure people see a future for themselves. Anybody, not anybody, but people, there's a broad path to come in, and once you're in, we want to keep you growing. Getting in and out of the Longwood medical area is not easy. So people who can do that every day reliably and do it with a smile on their face, and like our culture, we want to keep them and keep them growing with us. In the course of running these programs, we found that a lot of wonderful employees had some challenges with their math skills, their reading skills, and their English skills. And a lot of times we're using the AccuPlacer test, which is what the community colleges use, and it's a hurdle for people who are trying to get into community college, where they suddenly learn that they have to take all these pre-college courses in order to even start doing college-level work. So about 11 years ago, we started, with the help of the Boston Foundation, our Employee Career Initiative. And Mark Estrada is in the audience. He helped me get that off the ground from State Street. He's moved on to other things now, but still founded with me. And so in that program, we have on-site a career and academic advisor that anybody can go to and get help thinking about their next step. We offer the AccuPlacer on-site for our employees so they can test and figure out where they are academically, and then we make a career plan for them. We offer pre-college reading, math, and English courses for our employees, and we offer tutors who are our employees, as well as college-level science courses, all for free on-site for our employees, because we want them to think about going back to school, and maybe they went and it wasn't a good fit the first time, but we want them to be successful this time. And we want more people who are college ready so we can continue to invest in them and grow. And then one last thing I want to talk about real quick is we are about to launch a nurse residency program. So we made a decision a few years ago to only hire nurses at the bachelor level. But we were finding we weren't getting the diverse nurses that we needed. So we're about to launch a program where we're going to hire nurses at the associate degree level into a nurse resident role and sponsor their education to a bachelor's degree as they work for us. So we're excited about that.
Fabulous. Thanks, Joanne. Now we're going to go to Trent before we open up to Q&A, right? So get your questions ready. Trent, in the report recommendations, it talks about the need to invest in short-term certificates, ESL services, occupational training for immigrants, and vocational or apprenticeship programs. Given this set of recommendations, and as the city's largest workforce development funder, are you thinking in terms of policy and investment how are you thinking in terms of policy and investment strategies moving forward?
Yeah. So first I want to say that...
in 30 seconds or less.
Yes.
Just kidding, Trent.
First I want to say it's always, that's my job, is do it today, do it yesterday, 30 seconds, so I get the drill. So when the report came out, we're not astounded by the findings. We knew that Alicia and a lot of labor market folks have been championing or advocating for some of these issues and challenges for quite some time. What is also new is what are creative and deep, critical, long-term solutions that we can bring to the table. And that's what is eye-opening to us. So we have really, even before the report came out, we knew that we had to do something really bold and long-term. And so we have been looking at and been investing in programs and policies around this specialized skills and baseline skills jobs. So looking at advocating and encouraging more of the competency-based workforce training that needs more investments. While I think the employers and the success stories are great here, I want to echo that there have been some very, very, very good long-term systemic good practice programs that I like to highlight. Also, State Street wins. I don't know if they're here, but here, see, they're great. State Street has been doing this work for quite some time and have a lot of best practices. So, you know, I encourage you to look at and research their workforce hiring approaches as well. BMC is another employer that we've been working closely with to really recruit, outreach, and train the right folks from, across the city into their entry-level jobs and move them up the career ladder. Children's Hospital, Mass General has been doing this for quite some time, and we want to thank them for their partnership. The city and the state have been doing this work as well. About a year and a half ago, we had met with about 5 HR directors in the largest city agencies in the city. And we pulled up data on the rate of retirement in the next 5 years. And lo and behold, we found that about 35 to 50% of the city of Boston's labor force will retire within 7 years. And within other agencies, we find that rate to be higher. And so we also looked at the city as one of the largest employers in which we needed to think about recruiting folks from the neighborhoods, training them, and providing them with the opportunity so they can move up the ladder at the same time. And these are folks, and these are jobs that don't have a bachelor's degrees at the same time. And when we met with our HR directors, we asked them the same questions. What are the competency baseline specialized skills that you need so we can train for today so that they can obtain those jobs in a year or two? And so those are some of the investments, policy, funds that we have been moving in for quite some time. The other piece that we've been having a deeper dive on is our tuition-free community colleges, working very closely with our CCs to really look at ways in which we can design more competency-based skill sets, the academic credentials without compromising the integrity of it, and aligning workforce competencies, trainings, and experiences and translating those experiences as stackable credits towards associate degrees. Because at the end of the day, we have to look at the daily realities of people and communities and design pathways that are realistic for them to get there. and also getting the talent need that's needed for employers as well. So we don't want to give them, we want to make sure that the quality of work is there and the academic credentials are needed to get employers what they need so that they can fill those positions at the same time. Last but not least, Alicia's report have told the city of Boston, and we all know this, that more than half of our constituents and our workforce are immigrants. And we need to recognize that and champion that. And not only that, but employers, nonprofit institutions also have to perhaps as you can see here, perhaps change the way we think to accommodate the cultural and linguistic changes of our community, because that's where we are. And so one of the things that we are doing is really making a heavy investment in looking at aligning systems. For example, we've been working with the state and meeting with them for the last 2 to 3 years to make sure that the ESOL graduates, participants of ESL 2 and 3 are aligned with systems and workforce career pathways into these industry growth areas, as you can see here, making sure that the ESOL and the ABE community are not lost in the pathway of this work. And so we have also been working with a task force that invests in and taking a deep look at what we call skilled immigrants. So those who are coming to this country already had education, credentials, workforce experience in their home country, and how do we translate that to competencies and workforce skills so that they can advance rapidly instead of waiting 10 to 15 years. And so those are just some of the examples that the administration has been invested in, but I encourage us to look deeper into best practices around the city that has been going on for quite some time, and also newer industries. But at the end of the day, Boston residents are not going anywhere, and we're growing very diverse in multiple ways that provides an opportunity, asset, and value base to employers here. And so we have to embrace that and not see that as a deficit through the city.
Thank you, Trin. So at this point, we want to open it up for Q&A. We are committed to getting you out of here on time, 10:30, and so we want to quickly get into Q&A. Ask your questions. If you're looking for a job and these folks are hiring you, ask that job. I might just ask you to do it offline, but other than that, any question's a good question. Are we shouting it out, or are we running mics? We're shouting it out. I've got a hand way back here, and I'm going to come to the front. You next to the pole with the cap. Yes.
Hi, David from Brazilian Coders.
Hey, David.
This is really heartening. It's really inspiring to hear everyone's commitment to developing inclusion strategies, especially as someone who grew up speaking English as a second language myself. Now that we've... Oh, thank you, in case I wasn't loud enough already. So I guess now that we're identifying the BA requirement as an obstacle to getting that 50% of skilled but not necessarily degreed individuals into jobs, is it time, will it ever be time, to ban the BA requirement from coding jobs?
All right, that is a serious question. Who would like to take it?
I'll start. I don't really see us banning skills or requirements. I think I understand the sentiment, which is to say this is a market like many other markets that is shifting in terms of the way we speak about what we're looking for, the way we evaluate talent, and the way we either and where we source that talent from. But I also think it would be disingenuous to say that it is not actually an efficient method of hiring is to go to a campus and hire the computer science graduates. So I think I understand the sentiment, which is about equity and access. And I think Wayfair is one, but we are clearly not alone even in this room, much less in this city, of organizations that are trying to figure out how to make these jobs really broadly accessible. a ban doesn't strike me as something that gets us much further, though.
Yeah, and I'll take a stab as well. So as we look at our education system, we need to create ways to tell employers throughout the whole stream that you have someone in front of you that has the skills you're looking for. So we have to be more responsive to the employment sort of ecosystem and create new certificates more rapidly, create new training more rapidly, so when you get somebody from Resilient Coders, you know what you're getting, right? We need to do it to scale, right? And so right now, we are innovating in this space, but we're not scaling up quickly enough. Cities got to, we've got to get on board and help scale. States got to get on board and help scale so that we can say to Deborah and others on this panel, oh, no, this individual has what you're looking for and can get in. Clearly, you're doing it with partnership with folks here. We need to systematize that kind of credentialing at a scale.
But I also think that a bachelor's degree continuum is not necessarily a conventional one, right? I mean, you can come in and look at how to matriculate some of those competencies of work-based learning instead of starting from zero and transferring some of that learning into a community college, perhaps with a certificate program. But then while that person is working, translate some of those work experiences into an associate degree, and then have that person still working have options to transfer those credits and that associate degree to any of the four-year colleges. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a ban, but how do we design systems, align them efficiently so that regular people and working class people can get access to that system?
Yeah. So we already have a question up here, Gary.
Yeah. Thanks, John. I'm Gary Kaplan. I'm Executive Director of JFY Networks. I want to pose the question, what's the role of high schools in this whole skill continuum? 90% of our young people go through the public schools, and that's by far the largest pool of future employees. A couple of years ago, the Mass Business Alliance for Education put out a survey in which their employers cited basic reading and math skills as the most significant shortfall of their new employees. That also, of course, impacts the community college graduation rate. What's your impression of what we could do at the high school level to improve the skills of students coming out of that system?
Yep, Joanne?
A few things come to mind. I think the basics, reading, writing, math are important, and also maybe exposing young people in high school to the Accuplacer test and trying to align that a little bit better would be helpful. Career exploration and what are the key skills people need to have a job, encouraging kids to get a job in the summer, and thinking about skills like customer service and how people present themselves. I remember there was a time, and it was years ago, that kids weren't getting to school on time. And then if they're not getting to school on time, they're not going to get to work on time. So how do we make sure people understand the importance of being in the right place in the right time and showing up? Some really basic stuff can start at high school.
Yeah, I think one other thing, we've noticed at Encore, where we do have some jobs that require basic math as part of the assessment. So that's for our surveillance team, as well as for the table games dealer positions that I mentioned. We are seeing there's a lot of struggle on the basic math, and that would be an area where the high schools, I think, could, pick it up and almost if they can bring that math to life with, hey, here's how you could be using this in a job in the future.
In a casino game would be a fun way to bring it to life, I think.
Yes.
For a high school student.
You know what? I want you up here for the Q&A. I apologize. Can we bring? Please jump in. Can you jump up here with us?
Sure. I was just going to put in a plug and echo what Joanne said about summer jobs. So that's my other love, is working with OWD on the summer jobs program. And one of the things that we have recently been finding is that kids who participate in the summer jobs program, their attendance at school increases in the year after participating in the program. And so when you ask them them in focus groups, like, what did you learn this summer? They say, well, geez, if you're gonna be 5 minutes late, you may as well not show up on time. That is a huge life skill. And then it turns out when you show up at school more often in the year after participating, there's a 15 percentage point reduction in course failures in math and in English. So, there's something that goes hand in hand with work experience as well as academic experience. And now I'm gonna echo my Northeastern colleague here, right, and tout the experiential learning. But I think that's a key part of this as well.
So join us on stage. We've got a question right here. I'm going to try to continue to bounce around the room, so I'm going to get to that corner next. Give me a hand. Done. Red here is next. Red jacket.
Hi, my name is Nicole Richer. I am with the Compliance Mentor Group. I'm not too sure if it's a question, but more of telling you a little bit about myself and the programs that I offer. I know the gentleman was talking about high school, and I service a platform called the Construction Mentor Program, and we work directly with high schools and post-secondary schools. There's another post-secondary school called Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, and they're right in the city of Boston, and we've been able to partner with them for the last 6 or 7 years, bringing students on construction project sites for 12 months, and really building up their career readiness skills. In some cases for high school students, the feedback is that they're not ready or they can't compete with some of the other pathway programs because the first day they show up and they're gonna fall down. They don't show up on time. So we provide a mentorship platform utilizing the project team members and mentoring and coaching students to really improve their workforce readiness skills, but also provide a career readiness, a career exploration. There's so many STEM career opportunities that a lot of these high school students don't know about, and it builds their knowledge of what they might need to do and study more in school. So we've been really successful at providing that career exploration and building their excitement and that grit that you talked about. So at the end of the program, we have a vetted program, but in each phase, it's a takeaway. We have those students who are motivated and can really are interested in participating in the workforce. The other thing I wanted to mention with Benjamin Franklin, and the reason why we partner up with a lot of the post-secondary schools, is we bring in a lot of immigrants that their degrees or BAs haven't been transferred over to the U.S. College system. Last year we had a woman come from Algeria, really was a civil engineer, but couldn't transfer into getting a job. She was working at Dunkin' Donuts, entered into our program, was hired by the CM, the construction management company, as part-time, and then eventually they offered her this year a full-time project management position. So we're looking at all different types of people coming in, veterans looking to be retrained. They just need that exposure. So I'm asking you this because I know if you're interested in partnering, I've already have a system in place. I'd love to work more in other vocational programs, healthcare. I know I've talked to Jenny a little bit about construction, but I know that there's a need, and we'd be really looking for more partnerships.
Appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. We're going to go here, and if you can just pass that mic here. We're going to take 3 questions at this point, just so we can, because there are a lot of hands, and I want to make sure we're staying on time. We got 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to get responses, and I'll take another 3 questions. Those will be I think, our last questions. If you can keep your questions short, we'll try to get as many people in as possible. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Aisha Francis from Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, and my question is about the incumbent workforce training programs that some of you all have talked about. I'm curious about the time that it took you to create those, and some of the factors that went into deciding what would be a successful incumbent workforce training program, and maybe the size of them as well. I think someone from Beth Israel mentioned that in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the second question.
Hi, Chris Shannon from the Boston Fed. I'm very encouraged by the employers that are looking to go to a skills-based assessment rather than a paper credential-based assessment, and I know that's a challenge for HR because they have to completely shift their processes. But a lot of times the entry into these jobs is not HR per se, but the hiring managers. So I'd love to hear from the employers on what you're doing internally to kind of educate your hiring managers to think more skills-based than paper-based.
Thank you. And then the final question?
Yes, hi, my name is Andrea Payne. I'm with Timothy Smith Network. And the tech industry has an abysmal record of being inclusive in terms of Blacks and Latinx. We know that globally across the United States. So even though we're having this boom in Boston, there's still this large percentage of people in the Black and Latino communities who are not getting jobs. So what I want to know is, we know that racism is a part, but what are the other factors what are the factors that are driving this, that continue to drive this lack of inclusion in the workforce? And the second part of my question is, and how can we change that dynamic? And the second part of my question is retainment. My first job in corporate America was a nightmare. Nobody in my family had ever worked in corporate America. And I didn't know about all of the relationships you had to build and the daggers you had to, try to duck and all. I mean, it was just horrible. So when people get into yes, you all know that, right? So that when people get in, so let's say you are, because you mentioned resilient coders, you mentioned Bunker Hill and Roxbury Community College, so those are where people of color are in those schools. But when you get into the workplace, there is going to be some pushback. Racism is there. So do you all have any strategies for supporting people who are traditionally left out of the workplace once you get them hired, and being able to succeed in a workplace that is very difficult from anything that they've known, and they're dealing with people who are not familiar with dealing with them?
Three great questions. We're going to try to get you guys to react and respond to those questions. I promised 3 other questions afterwards. Midori gave me a look. We're going to try to get to maybe just, I know. We're going to try to figure out after the responses where we are. Fabulous questions. We're going to have amazing responses.
I'm going to start with what now seems to be the layup question, the easier question, around how long does it take to build an internal pipeline program? So, we start with a department that's in pain, that's asking to, can we suddenly, we can't find anybody, and then we start kind of really thinking it through with them. It takes a few months, at least 6 months usually, to kind of sit down with them, figure out what skills they need, what kind of people they need, and how we're going to do it. Other questions are, does it need a credential at the end of the day? And if it needs a credential, we'll take an external partner like a JVS or a Bunker Hill or somebody else. We'll look and make sure they have a good track record of succeeding with students as well. We'll figure out what it costs. We'll have a partnership with that hiring department, and we'll get going. And when we run it once, we usually run it multiple times, so that investment of time at the beginning usually pays off.
There was a question about how do you get your hiring managers to think about their hiring in a different way, and I'd say this is one of our for me, in trying to hire this volume of folks, this is one of our biggest challenges, especially with, for us, something like an English requirement when we do have a lot of guest-facing roles. And so, and a lot of that is continuing to have the conversation. Okay, how did the last week go? How was that round of interviews? And also giving them opportunities to meet face-to-face with candidates as much as possible and efficiently ask questions. So we do a lot of training for our hiring managers on skills-based behavioral interviewing, so they can, instead of looking at a resume, they can really talk to the person and ask them about situations they've been in that are in the past that are similar to situations they're going to be in the future. I think that can really help them get around just being stuck on the resume and the specific experience, and start to think about skills and the skills they need and who has them and who's going to match up.
I'll speak to the hiring manager question too, and then I'd like to address yours as well. So for the hiring managers are huge gatekeepers in the hiring process. And so when we were designing this Google certificate, we actually brought in our hiring managers to record video vignettes and talk about what they look for in candidates, provide a lot of tips on resume building, interviewing. And so it really forged this wonderful partnership, and having constant check-ins to say, what are you seeing from this candidate pool? How can we make adjustments? Has helped us be really agile along the way. So I think building the product with them front and center and actually being sort of the on-air talent in it has been great. We also were very intentional in our diversity and inclusion strategy in building the Google certificate. So when we look at data from the Level Playing Field Institute, for example, I know I'm a woman in engineering. If I see another woman in engineering on the screen, I'm 4 times more likely to engage with the content. And so everything from the on-air instructors that we selected to even screensavers on the computers we show. We feature a gay couple, a person in a wheelchair, the default pronouns we use. When we use examples of leaders, we use she or they. In our learner surveys, when we ask about demographic information, we don't ask on the gender binary. It's an open-ended question, which is tough to code data for our researchers, but really important to really showcase the inclusion. And so when we look at the data and we say, okay, over 60% of our learners are African American, Latinx, non-male, and or veteran, and yet our learners are completing the program, an 8-month-long program at 2.5 times the rate of general Coursera learners. We have to think that, that these efforts are paying off and that our learners can see themselves in the material and can hear these stories of Googlers who talk about the grit and the determination that it took to get into companies like Google. So I think there needs to be a real intention there to think about inclusion and diversity and what that means. And if it becomes an afterthought, you can have the representation, but the retention is going to be an issue. And so our IT support program at Google is now predominantly diverse. And so then you have interviewers along the years who represent those backgrounds. And so it's this sort of self-perpetuating cycle where you're bringing in more diversity of thought, of leadership, and that trickles down to the recruiting processes, to the mentorship, to the future managers in the program. And so it really starts at that entry point and sort of filters on through the years. But it takes really sustained effort, and it cannot be an afterthought. And I think when it's done right, it will reflect in the folks that you're bringing into your company.
I would say that we have noticed, I've been with Wayfair for 9 years, so I'm actually one of the longest tenured employees at this company, and I have noticed a distinct material shift in what employees want in the last couple of years, whether it's a function of the political climate, whether it's a function of a certain scale that we've reached, that we can now have these conversations because we're an employer of a certain size now. People want to be a part of more diverse workforces, including long-term employees, including people who themselves are part of majority communities. What they don't always know is how to go about doing that, how to go about creating inclusive environments. But what I see and I experience a lot is a workforce asking for it. And so what we've tried to approach it from a few different angles. The most obvious one is the recruiting angle, right? Better training for interviewers. About every interviewer at Wayfair now has to go through a hidden, what's called a hidden bias training, including people who have been interviewing well for years, right? I learned a lot in the training, and I would have called myself a pretty good interviewer, at least at the beginning of the training. So that's a part of on the way in the door. And then among populations who are here, there's sort of a major rise in employee resource groups here. And at most companies where populations, whether it's racial, gender, or interest-based, have started to form large, highly visible organizations within the company that themselves have political clout, have social capital, have an ability to influence the executive leadership, often contain executives themselves. And that, coupled with a really robust people analytics department, actually starts to help you get a sense of what's actually going on here. Because an isolated experience could be very real, could be very powerful, but it's very hard for people who are in a position to drive change to understand whether that was isolated or whether that was a pattern. And so whether it's sort of in the form of quarterly surveys that get pretty direct and pretty tough, or our ability to actually analyze trends and what kind of language is being used in performance reviews that are written across 12,000 employees, and what does that say about how we are training, coaching, and developing our people, are all things we're actually bringing an analytical tool set to a problem or a challenge that is often viewed as purely social, can start to help us sort of triangulate in on things we can do better. I'm very impressed by the stats you just shared, and I think we have a long way to go. But I also think the conversation is starting to round a corner in a way that feels quite promising, at least to me.
Great. So I want to take a shot at that last question because it's so dear to me, and I'll do quick. If you're out there training young Black and brown employees, please don't tell them that if they just work hard, that they're going to succeed. It's just a lie, right? In fact, going to the workplace, I actually thought that for a while, and luckily I had a white woman mentor in my corporate setting because there was nobody else that really shared experience, and she talked about sort of her experience as a woman in the workforce, and I was able to relay. I also had Inroads corporate training program, which was really strong back then, and helped me to understand. And when I sort of first day at work, you know, young Black immigrant from West Africa, and I walk in with like this plaid double-breasted suit, right? Because nobody went to corporate job before me, and my family thought I looked great, right? Maybe for a barbecue wedding or something, but, and I didn't know the hairstyle I needed to wear, right? And I was off, big time off, so everybody looked at me funny. And it's not a fun experience to not understand the executive skills, leadership skills, soft skills that you need to be successful. So forget the technical if people can't even get by your hairstyle, right? If they can't get by your demeanor, how you show up. And so I think it's an area that we can do a lot better in. And I think that's the biggest barrier that I see is the soft sort of skills, the leadership skills, executive skills that you need to succeed. I cannot go to 3 other questions, and I dearly apologize because I really love this conversation. It's super important. I urge you to continue it, right, here and beyond. And I want you to really give a real warm round of applause to our panelists here. You did an amazing job. And I want to call up the woman who was actually behind organizing all this, who in the Office of Economic Development for the city of Boston is our person who is trying to figure out how, from a policy standpoint and as a city, we are creating a better environment for our employers and our employees. And that's Midori. Midori is the Director of Business Development for the city of Boston.
Thank you, John. So I will be very quick. I know we're out of time. So I'm doing a quick closing remarks and highlighting some of the things that we heard today. So specifically, I think we all learned that individuals without a BA degree, without a traditional college degree, have the necessary skills to thrive in well-paying jobs and acquire them through non-traditional paths. So you've heard some specific creative strategies that are implemented by these employers. And I think the common threads that I heard is skills first, right? So it's not education, but what skills do you have and what skills do you need in order to move up the career ladder? And I think I also heard the notion of like being asset-based, right? So Jenny, you talked a bit about, if you were a church volunteer, right, you do have a customer skills, you do have a people skill, right? You do have those skills, even though you might not fit into perfectly into the job description that you're applying to, or you might not fit in exactly what they're looking for, really helping and giving tools for Boston residents in trying to figure out what their skill sets are and really building up their confidence. Alicia brought this up in her presentation around employers, if history repeats itself, are going to increase their education requirement, right, once the economy tanks, right? But we did hear some strategies from employers today around articulation agreements, specifically between Google and Northeastern, right? So you can get 12 credits towards bachelor's degree in IT if you do participate in the program, because your work-based experience and learning is going to be counting towards a college degree, so you don't have to start from zero, right? You don't have to start fresh. And I know CEO Boston Trent's office has also done some creative strategies around articulation agreements, where if you are a housekeeper, it goes through the Best Core Housekeeping training program, you get 9 credits towards Bunker Hill Community College in hospitality management, right? And I think we also have one of construction industry, where if you do participate in some of the construction apprenticeship programs, you do get 32 credits. That's half 50% towards his associate degree at Wentworth Institute of Technology, right? So we have to start thinking both short term, right? Right now, the hiring needs are high, the unemployment rate is low. What can we be doing to get these people upskilled quickly? But also on the long term, right? As Trin said earlier, we're not telling you not to go get a college degree, but we need those strategies so that people can keep moving up. I think, lastly, we need employers. I know who you are in the audience. I've spoken to many of you. We need your help to scale some of these innovative programs. We also need workforce development providers, a lot of you in the audience today, community college system. We need all of us to work together to scale some of these targeted training programs. So call for action. Employers in the room and outside, I'll be sure to reach out to you. Look to those untapped source of talent. Look to those other 50% that do not have a bachelor's degree, right? And come talk to us at the city if you're not sure how to start, right? We're here as a resource. We will facilitate a number of partnerships among different employers and workforce development providers. We are very experienced in it. We will do the work for you. We have created an apprenticeship program. Jen and I will sit down for 3 months, ask you what are the skills and competencies you need in this job, and we will help you build that program, and we'll help you find that talent. So come talk to us. And I think those are all my points. And last but not least, I wanted to just give a shout out to all the staff that made this happen today, from Office of Economic Development, Office of Workforce Development. Thank you.